ब्रह्मण नद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे शम्यप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। सूत उवाच ब्रह्मनद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे क्षम्यप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। तटे क्षम्यप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। सुत उवाच नद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे सम्याप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। उवाच ब्रह्मनद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे सम्याप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। सूत उवाच ब्रह्मनद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे सम्यप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। सूत उवाच ब्रह्मनद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे सम्याप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। सूत उवाच ब्रह्मनद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे सम्याप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। उवाच ब्रह्मनद्यां सरस्वत्याम् आश्रमः पश्चिमे तटे सम्यप्रास इति प्रोक्ता सूत उवाच सरस्वत्याम् पश्चिमे तटे सम्यप्रास इति प्रोक्ता ऋषीणां सत्रवर्धनः। सरस्वती आश्रमः cottage for meditation पश्चिमे on the west तटे bank Shamyaprasaha the place name Shamyaprasa iti thus proktaha said to be Rishinam of the sages Satravardhanaha that which enlivens activities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Sri Suta said, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related with the Vedas, There is a cottage for meditation at Shamyaprasa, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages. Purport: for spiritual advancement of knowledge, a suitable place and atmosphere are definitely required. The place on the western bank of the Saraswati is especially suitable for this purpose, and there is the ashrama of Vyasadeva at Shamyaprasa. Srila Vyasadeva was a householder, yet his residential place is called an ashrama. An ashrama is a place where spiritual culture is always foremost. It does not matter whether the place belongs to a householder or a mendicant. The whole Varnashrama system is so designed that each and every status of life is called an ashrama. This means that spiritual culture is the common factor for all. The brahmacharis, the grihasthas, the vanaprasthas and the sannyasis all belong to the same mission of life, namely realization of the Supreme. Therefore, none of them are less important as far as spiritual culture is concerned. The difference is a matter of formality on the strength of renunciation. The sannyasis are held in high estimation on the strength of practical renunciation. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to text 2 of chapter 7, titled The Son of Drona Punished, Canto 1. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Caitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Namaum Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swaminiti Namine Namacharya Padaya Nitai Kripa Pradayine Gaurakatha Dhamadaya Nagaragramatarini Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Gopi Paranadana Dase Iti Namine Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate giram yatkripatamaham bande Shri Gurudintarinam yatkripatamaham bande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Katanchana Smrite yasmin dushkaram sukaram bhavet vismrite viparitam syat Shri Chaitanyam Namamitam. So continuing from yesterday's text, it is mentioned how yesterday's text translation, I would just read that out again. All glory and success to Srila Narada Muni, because he glorifies the activities of the personality of Godhead, and so doing he himself takes pleasure and also enlivens all the distressed souls of the universe. So we saw in the previous chapter how Narada Muni explained to Vyasadeva that by glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one derives pleasure and also enlivens all those who hear such glorification. And so this was Vyasadeva's dilemma. After he compiled all the Vedic scriptures, he was still feeling dissatisfied, and Narada Muni, his spiritual master, gave him the direct solution, which is to glorify, because he had not sufficiently and clearly and explicitly glorified Krishna. So he was feeling dissatisfied. So the solution he gave was to directly, explicitly glorify Krishna and sufficiently glorify Krishna, so that that becomes very pleasurable, and also it becomes very pleasurable for the audience. So here, if we notice, it's continuing with the same theme. It's the first question Rishi Shaunaka asks, O Sutta, the great and transcendently powerful Vyasadeva heard everything from Sri Narada Muni. So he heard everything. So after Narada's departure, what did Vyasadeva do? Then Sri Sutta said, so this is the translation of this verse, on the western bank of the river Saraswati, which is intimately related to the Vedas, there is a cottage for meditation at Samya Prasa, which enlivens the transcendental activities of the sages. Okay, so then it will go on to describe Vyasadev's practice of bhakti, then how he saw the absolute personality of Godhead along with his external energy, which was under his full control. Okay, so yesterday I think there was a question at the end of the class, and I thought that that question actually provides, and the answer that Radhika Nagar Prabhu gave provides a good context to continue into today's chapter. If I remember it right, the question was something to the extent that when preachers present Krishna consciousness, they present, okay, on the one hand we say the material world is full of misery and things like that, and on the other hand we speak about Krishna consciousness. So what is the right way to present Krishna consciousness? Something to that extent, am I right? Those who were there in the class, anyone recollects? Yeah, something like that. Okay. So here, okay. So the basic principle of Krishna consciousness is, let's first of all understand what the Bhagavatam is about. That's the basic. The whole Krishna consciousness movement is based on the Bhagavatam, which is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam. This is our proof. So we are following the teachings of the Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada explained that the Srimad Bhagavatam is a cultural presentation for the re-spiritualization of the entire world. So it is a cultural presentation. So what culture is being presented? It's a culture of the Srimad Bhagavatam. There are different kinds of cultures, like different scriptures promote, or rather help to practice different kinds of cultures. The Karma Kanda scriptures help the living entities to cultivate the culture of how to enjoy the senses in a dharmic manner. But the Bhagavatam, the culture of the Bhagavatam is how to practice unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service unto the Supreme Lord. So this is the culture of the Bhagavatam. And this culture of the Bhagavatam is called Krishna consciousness. Now, where did Srila Prabhupada derive that word Krishna consciousness? If we study a little bit about it, Prabhupada explains actually that he derived that expression Krishna consciousness from Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami, he uses the expression Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. Mati means consciousness, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita. So that consciousness which is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa is called Krishna consciousness. So it is, in fact, if to define it as Krishna Bhakti Rasa consciousness is a bit too long. So it is simplified as Krishna consciousness. But we should remember that whenever we hear the expression Krishna consciousness, it is derived from Rupa Goswami's Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati, which means consciousness which is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa. And Prabhupada explains in the Nectar of Devotion that rasa means juice, it means taste, mellow, he says. And now we are in winter. Soon summer is going to come, and we especially relish the rasa of juices during summer. So Krishna Bhakti Rasa, Prabhupada says it is like juice. So Krishna Bhakti Rasa is the juice of Krishna consciousness. That consciousness, is juice. It's called the Krishna Bhakti Rasa juice. So when our consciousness is saturated with the Krishna Bhakti Rasa juice, that is called Krishna consciousness. And we are now in the first canto. And before Prabhupada begins the first canto, Prabhupada writes that the best medium to approach the Bhagavatam is through Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the personification, or you could say the highest example of one whose consciousness is saturated. They are not able to hear. Okay. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the highest example of one whose consciousness is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa, because he is God himself, and he is come to taste this Krishna Bhakti Rasa. God himself is attracted by this Krishna Bhakti Rasa. He wants to understand what his energy, Srimati Radharani. In the spiritual world, all energies are persons. There's nothing called impersonal energy there. There's nothing called all energies are personal. So Srimati Radharani is the manifestation of Krishna's pleasure potency. And so Krishna comes as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to experience this Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So I wanted to set that context, so that whenever we hear things like ashrama or rules, regulations, different things that we hear of, the whole process of sadhana bhakti, especially Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, when we hear a lot about rules and regulations and things like that, but it is all set within the context of Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So that we should never forget that, because the very idea, the very phrase Krishna consciousness is coming from that Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So, and Prabhupada explained this very nicely. He said that the whole program that he set up, the morning program beginning with Mangalarati and then Japa, Darshanarati, the Bhagavatam class, the whole combination and the activities for the day, the service for the day, then evening Sandhyarati, Prabhupada set it up in such a manner that he says that by doing this, one can remain always enthusiastic, because this provides that Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So, and Rupa Goswami in the Upadeshamrita explains that Utsaha is the first principle of devotional service. Utsaha, of course, Utsaha Dhairyat, he goes on, but Utsaha is the first principle, that enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm comes because by following the Acharya, one gets infused with that same, the Bhakti Shakti of the Acharya. So then one becomes enlivened in Krishna consciousness. So there is no other way. We have to follow the prescription. We cannot imagine, okay, it's Bhagavatam, let me do something, or we can't imagine, okay, let me do Govardhan Parikrama in the morning instead of Mangalarati. We can't just come up with different, all of them may be Krishna consciousness, but there's a specific formula that Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, has given us. So, and if we stick to that formula, that is the method for us to relish that Krishna Bhakti Rasa. And when we relish that Krishna Bhakti Rasa, then all the different activities of our life are automatically molded in the best possible manner. So Prabhupada, during the initial days of the Krishna consciousness movement, he did not stress on Varnashrama at all. In fact, he said it's not possible. There is a lecture where he says it's not possible in this age. Later on, he goes on, as the years passed by, he said Varnashrama is important. So, the moment we hear the word Varnashrama, we should first of all understand that it is set within the context of Krishna Bhakti Rasa. It is not a separate path. It is within that's why it's called the Daivi Varnashrama path. So here the word ashrama is used referring to the householder's life, and Prabhupada very clearly says that it doesn't matter whether it is the brahmacharis, the grahasthas, the vanaprastha sannyasis, all belong to the same mission of life. So the whole classification of varna and ashrama is meant so that we attain the goal of life, which is Krishna Prema. Now, within the context of ashramas, within the context of varnas, okay, how does it matter whether one is a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra? Does it really matter? Is it a gradation in terms of one is superior to the other? If we consider Varnashrama by itself, yes, it is a superior classification. What is the Brahmanas are higher than the Kshatriyas. It's a hierarchy. Kshatriyas are higher than the Vaishyas. Vaishyas are higher than the Shudras. And of course, Shudras are higher than Mlecchas and others. But so it is a very steep hierarchy if we consider it independent of the context of Krishna consciousness. But within the context of Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada explained that it does not matter what work one is performing. There is no meaning. In fact, Prabhupada was not in favor of using the expression Brahmana Vaishnava, Kshatriya Vaishnava. In fact, he said we should not do that. We should not classify, we should not designate Vaishnavas as Brahmana Vaishnavas and Kshatriya Vaishnavas and Vaishya Vaishnavas and Shudra Vaishnavas. He said that we should just have one classification called Vaishnavas. But within that classification, someone can perform the Brahminical duties, someone can perform the Kshatriya duties, someone can perform Vaishya duties, and someone can perform Shudra duties. But they're all meant to please Krishna, and the hierarchy is non-existent. So what really exists is everybody is a Vaishnava, and everybody is being engaged according to their psychophysical nature. So then the question may come up, why did Prabhupada actually institute this at all? Why did he say that he wants to do it at all? Why did he say that it's not needed? And later on, why did he say it is needed? So I'll just bring your attention to the exact conversation where Prabhupada actually said it is important. And is it applicable to ISKCON members? He said yes. And here it is. Okay, this is in Mayapur. We are in February. This is the 14th of February, 1977. We are today 21, exactly 1 week later. This is 77, so which means we are 41 years later talking about this conversation. Satsurupa, regarding Varnashram, introduced starting with ISKCON community. Prabhupada, yes, Brahmana, Kshatriyas, there must be regular education. Harishori, but in our community, if we are training up as Vaishnavas, Prabhupada, yes. Harishori, then how will we be able to make divisions in our society? Prabhupada, Vaishnava is not so easy. The Varnashrama Dharma should be established to become a Vaishnava. It is not so easy to become a Vaishnava. Harishori, no, it is not a cheap thing. Prabhupada, yes, therefore this should be made. Vaishnava, to become Vaishnava is not so easy. If to become Vaishnava is so easy, why so many fall down? It is not so easy. And later in the same conversation, Harishori, where will we introduce the Varnashram system then? Prabhupada, in our society, amongst our members. Harishori, but if then everybody is being raised to the Brahminical platform, not everybody, why are you misunderstanding? Varnashrama, not everybody Brahmana. Harishori. No, but in our society, practically everyone is being raised to that platform. So then one might ask, what is? Prabhupada, that is, everybody is being raised, but they are falling down. So, Prabhupada is concerned about devotees falling down. Yes, Varnashrama is not needed if devotees do not fall down. But when devotees fall down, then Prabhupada began to conceive of the Varnashrama system. So there, of course, I mean, this is just a small excerpt of the Varnashrama conversations, but there are a large number of conversations where Prabhupada repeatedly emphasizes that in our movement, we shall not call anybody Brahmana Vaishnavas and Kshatriya Vaishnavas. We won't, everybody is Vaishnava. They'll simply perform their duties according to their psychophysical nature such that they do not fall down. Because Prabhupada is saying that Vaishnava means is not so easy. So the very definition of Vaishnava means, for the way Krishna consciousness as presented by Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati is they stressed, of course as Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu himself coming down from him, from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is that bhakti should be ahaituki and apratihata. It should be unmotivated and uninterrupted. So the moment you say uninterrupted, it means there is no more the platform of, there is not the platform of Vaishnava. Prabhupada is saying, Vaishnava is not so easy, then why they are falling down? So to give an analogy, suppose we have a very rough car. And we have a mobile phone which does not have a very good connectivity, and we need to go somewhere. If the connectivity is poor, then the rough conditions of the ride will tend to overwhelm us. That's what happens. But if we are absorbed in going to that particular goal and we have a good connectivity, connected to that, we have a good map, we have good internet connectivity, so that we have a good map and we are progressing, because you have these Google Maps which can help you drive to any part of the country or even any part of the world. Of course, you can't drive across the oceans. I meant once you are in a country, then you can go any part of the country. So if you have a rough car, but and your connectivity is poor, then you will not be able to use the map properly. And so generally the experience becomes a bit overwhelming. But if the connectivity is good, then it does not really matter, even if the ride is rough, if you're focused on the goal. So that is the whole idea of Varnashrama. So it's like having a rough car. We have our conditionings. So, but if we have good connectivity, if we are very, very well connected, strong connectivity, which means that we've practiced Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti very nicely every day, waking up in the morning, following the morning program, and very properly doing everything, then there's very good connectivity. So in such a state of connectivity, of course, it's just not doing the external activities, as Prabhupada explains in the Nectar of Instruction. Advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So it's very important that we practice Krishna consciousness, we practice the program with the proper attitude that I want to attain love of Godhead in this very lifetime. So if one practices like that, then there is good connectivity. So if there is such good connectivity, then one does not matter what one's conditioning is. But if there is not good connectivity, then the conditionings begin to overwhelm us. And when the conditionings begin to overwhelm us, then we lose out on connectivity. So we need to understand that very clearly, why Prabhupada changed his emphasis from beginning from no Varnashram to Varnashram. Because sometimes devotees quote only one part of the conversation, one part of the whole thing, and say, oh, Prabhupada did not want Varnashram. And so the other devotees, they say, no, Prabhupada wanted Varnashram. But it's very important to understand the basis of everything, whether not wanting Varnashram or wanting Varnashram, is the fact that everything is centered around Krishna Bhakti Rasa, and everything is centered around attaining love of Godhead. So this is a very, very important aspect of the Krishna consciousness movement, that we shouldn't lose sight of this, that Krishna consciousness is a pleasurable activity. It is a pleasurable activity. The moment it is becoming a burdensome activity, then we are not doing something right. We are not doing something right. Because by definition, Prabhupada said, like sugar, you touch anywhere, it is sweet. So it cannot, of course, Rupa Goswami gives the example of jaundice, a person with jaundice. In the beginning it is bitter when they take sugarcane juice, but later on it becomes relishable. So yes, in the beginning stages we may find little difficult, but that difficulty period is also very little, because Krishna provides so much taste. So later on when we are practicing, if having gained taste we are losing it, something is wrong, or we are getting overwhelmed with other things, something is wrong, we are not doing something right. Because Krishna Bhakti Rasa is supposed to constantly expand, and that is the essence of Krishna consciousness. This, as Yamunacharya sings, Yad Yadavadi, whenever I taste Krishna consciousness is an ever expanding taste, then when I think of sex life I spit at that thought. So the nature of Krishna Bhakti Rasa is naturally ever expanding, that when we think of material enjoyment we should develop a distaste for it. And coming to the specific question which was brought up yesterday and which forms the context of yesterday's verse, and today is also speaking about enlivening activity. So I was I was thinking that I would like to bring up this point that Prabhupada actually writes that one can see Krishna in every page of the Bhagavatam. If one hears the Bhagavatam with rapt attention. Sorry. And then he says that only if one is pure in the mind can one hear the Bhagavatam with rapt attention. And then he says, only one who is pure in the activities of eating, sleeping, mating, defending can be pure in mind. So, the principles that we have, the 4 regulative principles, are not meant to confine us. Rather, it is meant to give us that higher experience. So, by being pure in eating, sleeping, mating and defending, the mind becomes pure. And when the mind becomes pure, one can hear the Bhagavatam with rapt attention. And when one hears the Bhagavatam with rapt attention, one can see Krishna in every page of the Bhagavatam. So, the regulative principles are not just some moral principles, they are cognitive principles. Cognition means principles to perceive reality. So, it is not that, okay, it is that if you don't follow the principles, Krishna will punish. No, if we don't follow, Krishna will punish us. That's not what it is about. It is about principles of cognition. By following the regulative principles, our mind becomes pure. When the mind becomes pure, we can hear the Bhagavatam with rapt attention. And when you hear the Bhagavatam with rapt attention, then we can see Krishna in every page of the Bhagavatam. So, when Prabhupada presents Krishna consciousness, his presentation of Krishna consciousness is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So therefore, the audience, even though Prabhupada may speak strong words, Prabhupada is conveying experienced knowledge. Bhagavatam is just not knowledge. It is Krishna himself. And it is something you cannot just experience the Bhagavatam just by reading the Bhagavatam. You read it with the proper attitude, follow the principles, follow the teachings of the Bhagavatam, then we experience the Bhagavatam. So, when Prabhupada presents Krishna consciousness, it is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So, therefore, even though he speaks very strongly, there is that intrinsic attraction to that katha. So, similarly, when we present Krishna consciousness, depending on how much we relish Krishna consciousness, to that extent, we'll be able to convey that experience to someone we are preaching to. So, if we just dryly, academically just try to preach. Yes, of course, even it's our duty, we are duty bound to preach, but if it is not saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa, as Prabhupada said, purity is the force. So when purity is the force, then the words that we speak becomes saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa, not by our own accord, because by the mercy of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. That's why it said that Caitanya smrite yasmin dushkaram sukaram bhavet smrite vipritam syat Sri Chaitanyam namamitam. Ordinarily, it's very, very difficult to convince anybody to take up Krishna consciousness, but when we follow the teachings of Srila Prabhupada, then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes our words suitable for their understanding. And for that, first of all, the purity is force means we should have experienced knowledge, not just knowledge, experienced knowledge of the Bhagavatam. So when we have experienced knowledge of the Bhagavatam, when we speak to an audience, we are conveying that experienced knowledge. And if our experience is not an experience of Krishna Bhakti Rasa, then what we are conveying is some kind of a academic or some kind of a mental thing. So that will not have its effect. So sometimes you see some people just speak only about material world is useless, this, that, and all that. But okay, that's fine. We need to do that. But is that being presented with a certain realization, the experience that is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa? Then you can see that if we do that, then we see there is an effect on the audience. Of course, nobody can imitate Prabhupada. But the point is that once we understand the basic fact that everything in Krishna consciousness is rasa driven, Krishna Bhakti Rasa driven, and if that becomes the center, then whatever we present will work. So here in this particular context, I wanted to just bring up this point that Prabhupada uses the expression that Vyasadeva was a householder, yet his residential place is called a ashram. So Krishna consciousness is not, even though when we hear the word ashram, it is not meant to be a boring or a dry life. It is a life which is infused with Krishna Bhakti Rasa, and that is the context of the whole system of Varnashrama system that Prabhupada had envisioned for the members of the Krishna consciousness movement. So I think I'll stop there if there are any comments or questions. He raised his hand first.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for your class. It was very insightful. Appreciate it. Prabhu, you made a point regarding sometimes people speak and the motivation, if the motivation is wrong, it doesn't matter how you speak or you don't have the realization, it won't have any effect.
Yes.
And I wonder if sometimes in connection to the discussion related to Varnashram,
yes,
there may, because there's two extremes. One extreme is being extremely liberal, where everything should go, it's all about the individual. And the other extreme is being extremely conservative, where one is not able to like embrace the balance between the two, according to time, place, circumstance, or whatever. And sometimes it's a very scary thing because of the history in our movement, where people were trying to accommodate too many things and it created problems.
Yes.
So where do you draw that line where we don't become so conservative that we're not accommodating enough of other devotees who may find it difficult to fit within this, our own perceived paradigm of what Varnashram should be? Because that creates problems also where there's some kind of insensitivity and it creates discord and even public spats. People go on the internet and start calling out other devotees because they said certain things they don't agree with YouTube channels and all that. So how do we prevent this from actually in the long term splitting the movement into two factions and destroying the unity that Prabhupada wanted us to establish?
Sure, very good point. The basic idea in implementing a Varnashram system is who has the authority to do it. That is the critical issue. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is a resident of the spiritual world. Prabhupada is a resident of the spiritual world. So when they speak about Varnashram and when we speak about Varnashram, there's a big difference. So they don't have any, they are looking at it purely from a Krishna conscious point of view. But when we look at it, I don't know how we are looking at it, depending on the modes in which we are. So the very first requirement to establish a Varnashram society is to have advanced devotees. When I say advanced devotees, at least Brahminical. Because as Prabhupada said, without the head, nothing else can function properly. Right? So we can't try to institute all of it simultaneously. It's just not going to happen. We can't just sit and say, okay, now let's have this and this and this, and it's not going to happen like that. First of all, if we are successful in creating a society of some very genuine and a significant number of Brahminical devotees, actual Brahminical devotees, not by word Brahmana, actual, they're actually simple, they're actually tolerant, actually forgiving, all the different qualities of a Brahmana. Once we become successful in that, only at that point anything becomes meaningful. Otherwise the discussion is just academic. Because the whole point is to translate this into reality. So it is very much possible for someone to become a Brahmana without any external help. By following the teachings of Prabhupada, one can at least raise oneself to the Brahminical platform. And when devotees are situated in that platform, then the other things can start. So the first thing in my opinion is that, I got this from Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. He wrote an article called Varnashrama ISKCON's Mission Unfulfilled, where he brings up this point very nicely. Without a head, what are we going to do? So the whole success of this Varnashrama project depends on us ISKCON creating a group of genuine Brahminical devotees. Creating means people have elevated themselves to be at least on the Brahminical platform. Otherwise, it's just, as you're saying, it just gets polarized into different extremes. That's one consideration. The other consideration is that if you actually notice Prabhupada's, if you study how Prabhupada dealt with people, like sometimes there is this controversy about Prabhupada, the way he spoke about women. Okay, there's so much of controversy about it. But then there is also this thing about how he actually dealt with women, right? So they think that what Prabhupada wrote in the books and the way Prabhupada did things are different. Actually, they're not. It's the same thing. What he wrote in the book, how he dealt with is not contrary to what he wrote. But when he dealt with women, he was accommodating. These are the principles which are there in the book. But he was, when you deal with people, you have to deal with them according to what they are. Whatever may be you have to enable them to practice Krishna consciousness very nicely. Otherwise, what's the point? So Prabhupada accommodated everybody with the idea to make them practice Krishna consciousness nicely. But if you look at what he said we should do to our girl children, you notice that without exception, everywhere he says the same thing. That he says that, okay, train them nicely, how to be obedient to the husband, how to be chaste, how to cook nicely. These are the only things he spoke. Don't send them to college. Even when he spoke at Varnashram college, he said no need for girls. So that looks very, very extreme. But the point is that because he knew that if children, they have the capacity, from the time they are born, if they are born to devotees, they have the capacity. But those of us who are from the outside world, we've already been conditioned by so many years of this thing. Where do we even have the capacity to fit into the Varnashrama system? Whatever. We have limited capacities, but the children born to devotees, they have much, much more capacities than all of us. So they could attempt it. So even this, first of all, they should be Brahmana. Second is, it's not going to, I don't know if it's going to happen with the generation of people who have come out of mainstream society. Yes, they may make an endeavor, but the actual thing will be established only by children of devotees. That's my realization. It's just because they have that natural, they're so to speak uncontaminated by the conditionings of the material world. So right from the beginning they have that opportunity. So if they're molded nicely, then these things fit in together very nicely. This is just my thought on it.
So just to clarify my understanding,
sure, Brahma.
What you're saying is that according to who we're dealing with, we take a certain approach. So if we're dealing with someone that we can identify has got the qualifications, then we can be a little bit more. But if someone is struggling,
yes,
then the approach can be adjusted so that we push them along slowly as far as they can take without creating an aversion to the whole system completely by being too harsh with them.
Exactly. The whole thing is meant to help on progress. So if in the name of rules we don't, encourage, a person is not progressing, what is the point? So it should be tailor-made according to the people's requirement. But the tailor-made necessity is generally required when we are coming from the outside society. But for children born to devotees, you don't require that much of tailor-made solutions. It is more like generic thing. Right? Yeah.
Thank you.
Prabhu, I have two take-homes and two queries.
Sure.
First one is, nice point you mentioned that one who follows the processes and principles of the Acharya Srila Prabhupada is imbued with the Bhakti Shakti of the Acharya Srila Prabhupada. So that's very motivating. Secondly, it was a flash that you mentioned how the word Krishna consciousness evolved and Krishna Bhavana.
Krishna Bhakti Rasa
Mati. Yeah, so the word rasa had kind of disappeared from my mind, so it makes a lot of sense when you say it's not dry and there is Krishna, it's not just Krishna Bhakti, there's Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So there's a lot of mellow involved. So these are the two take homes.
Thank you.
So the query. First, from your, you also mentioned that Prabhupada brought in the concept of Varnashrama towards the later years because he wanted the journey to be smooth. However, the journey...
He didn't want the journey to be smooth.
Smoother?
No, he didn't want all that. He wanted people to attain love of Godhead. Initially, he didn't bother whether the journey is rough or not. You focus on that. When people are not able to focus on it, not able to remain connected, just like I give the example, mobile, internet, they're not able to remain connected. So then the struggle is overwhelming them. Then he wanted to make the ride smoother, so that at least they don't, the connectivity is poor, they don't give it up entirely. Yeah. Okay.
That was exactly my query, that you mentioned, however, it depends on the connectivity.
Yes.
So any practical pointers from your personal realizations on how to make the connectivity better?
How to make the connectivity better? For me, I think in my life, I've always noticed that the Prabhupada's that sentence in Upadeshamrita, advancement in Krishna consciousness depends on the attitude of the follower. So for me, everything lies there. The key lies there. The practices are there. But if we have the attitude that we won't attain love of God in this lifetime, whatever may be my mistakes, whatever may be my shortcomings, I want to rectify them and attain that at any cost. At any cost. So then naturally things fall in place. The attitude, I think, makes the biggest difference. Because otherwise we see, right? Devotees have been practicing, they fall down, all kinds of things happen. But I think the whole thing lies there, that attitude depends on attitude.
And secondly, Prabhu, you mentioned rightly that the success of either Varnashrama, or you said that just by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, without any extraneous help, a person can elevate oneself to the Brahminical platform. So the query is, what are the practical symptoms of this Brahminical platform you mentioned?
Well, when I say without external help, I didn't mean not help of devotees. I meant to say that you don't need for Kshatriyas you need an administrative structure, but for Brahmanas, what structure you need? They are not dependent on anything. That's what I meant. So just from the books and by practice with devotees, we can do it. But other things require structures and all that. Okay, let me put it the other way around. It'll be more easier. So I would say that let us focus, instead of the Brahminical qualities, let us focus on what are the symptoms of an advanced devotee. Okay, and then from there everything else can flow down. So in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami gives the characteristics of bhava. Okay, now these are not ecstatic symptoms and all that, which can be faked by people. These are things which cannot be faked. 9 symptoms which cannot be faked. Shantir avyartha kalatvam viraktir mana shunyata asha bandha samutkanta namagane sadaruchi Asaktis tad gunakyane, pritis tad vasati stale. Shanti, forgiveness, avyartha kalatvam, always utilizing one's time in Krishna consciousness. Shanti avyartha kalatvam, viraktir, detached, manashunyata, not at all bothered about personal reputation. I sometimes devotees ask me this question when I say this. So I always give the example, like I've seen this once, that many of us may have seen this. Sometimes there are feasts, okay? So I remember there's once a feast where one senior devotee came after the feast was over, and then, you didn't keep a plate for me? He got so upset, On the other hand, I've also seen a feast where one very senior devotee came and everything was over. And when he heard that, he just said, "Oh, I'm late. What to do? Krishna's mercy," and he just left. So look at the contrast there. One is virakti. I'm a senior devotee. So where is that? I'm a senior devotee. Why your plate is not kept for me? The other person thinking, this is Krishna's mercy. It's my fault. That is called manashuryata. He's not thinking I'm a devotee. I'm a senior devotee. I need this position. I'm just giving a practical example. And manashunyata, asha bandha samutkanta. He's always full of hope. Namagane sadaruchi, always chanting. By default, they chant. I've seen some devotees like that. Even if there's an interruption in the class, let's say if mic is not working, in that 1 minute they say Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You can hear Vaisheshika Prabhu. You see him. You will not even 1 minute he's quiet. Even when the mic there's interruption, he would sing Hare Krishna. So Asha Bandha Samutkanta. What is it? Namagane Sadaruchi, Asittis Tad Gunakyane. He is very attached to glorifying Krishna. And Pritis Tad Vasiti Stale, very attached to the holy places connected to Krishna's pastimes. So, of course, this could be to varying degrees. Somebody who manifests to the highest degree is an Uttamadhikari, obviously. Because prema always obviously has the symptoms of bhava. But these are symptoms which cannot be faked. You stay with a person for 1 year. Observe a person for 1 year. You will easily know whether this cannot be faked, these things. So, that like sometimes with devotees also, how to accept a guru, look for these things. And to see how much they are exhibiting these things and be convinced. Because sometimes there is this thing that Uttamadhikari, it is an esoteric thing. It's not esoteric, it's very scientific. These 9 symptoms are there. Please see how many of these symptoms they are exhibiting. And whether you are happy with that level to which they are exhibiting, okay, accept them. Like that. It's not so complicated. So, anyway, so if you go by that at least is a symptom of an advanced devotee, because this is not just Brahminical qualities. It also has Pritistad Vasitistale and Namagane Sadaruchi. So it's a combination of both. Like you have forgiveness and things like you have Manashunyata and all those things are there. So that combination will help us to determine. It's already 9 o'clock, so those who want to leave can leave.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for the class. When you mentioned about the attitude, you said the attitude is desiring to attain love of Godhead. Is this the attitude that Prabhupada is talking about when he says the key to success in spiritual life? Or Prabhupada is talking about something else? Success is defined as Krishna Prema. And attitude to attain that success means let me practice bhakti in an unmotivated and uninterrupted manner to attain that. So our practice is not usually unmotivated or uninterrupted. So that's not an easy platform. So if our attitude is, let me get over this motivated and interrupted type of devotional service and let me practice unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service and attain love of God. That is the right attitude. On the same point, it all boils down to attitude. So then you said it's more favorable when we have the structure of Varnashrama, Daivi Varnashrama.
Yeah.
And for those of us who don't have this structure now, and we want to be connected properly, we must be seeking absolute truth, right? So how do we know? We must be feeding the soul, and
if you are looking for absolute truth, then we want to feed the soul, not the senses, not the mind, or not the false ego especially. So how can devotees understand, like distinguish whether they're actually feeding the soul or they're feeding the false ego?
Prabhupada actually, Bhagavatam clearly speaks about how to know whether one is properly situated in Krishna consciousness. Yayatma suprasidati, which means that one is constantly satisfied in the heart. That is a symptom of knowing whether one is practicing bhakti properly. So that sense of contentment will be there. That not only the sense of contentment, not only the sense of satisfaction, but that ever expanding taste, both of them will be there. And of course, the distaste for material enjoyment is understood. I'm not even speaking about it. But the other aspect of it, which is that yayatma suprasi, completely satisfied in the heart. If in a 24 hours, how much are we feeling that complete satisfaction of the heart? That is a barometer for checking.
When we are following the process, when we are doing sadhana, then we take decisions whether to do this or do that. And then our mind poses challenges. Of course, the contentment and those factors are there, but through the process, how do we know that we are actually feeding the soul and not the false ego? So we are not making mistakes and just wasting our time like that.
Usually, I can speak for myself, but generally that is the practice also, that devotional service is usually practiced in the association of devotees. Not usually, we already have association of devotees, but even among association of devotees, we need to be in the association of those who are superior to us and who can help us in our progress. So by discussing with devotees who are advanced, and so then we'll know whether what we're doing is right, what we're doing is wrong. Of course, the standard practices are there, but within the practices, then there are other details. So that helps us to remain focused. So at least, Prabhupada always, right, devotional service is always practiced under the guidance of a superior. So that guidance is important, that we have to, on an ongoing basis, we should take that guidance. It need not be from one person. If it's one person, great. But if one person is not available, okay, a few devotees, whatever. But there has to be some system of receiving guidance. So that is what I personally follow. That so that helps us to remain free from anxieties of whether this is the right thing to do or that's the right thing to do. Because at least because we don't have much options in the material world. Either listen to the mind or listen to the devotees whom we are associated to. So if we listen to the mind, then we are not sure, is this coming from Paramatma or is it coming from is it coming from the mind? So then, but when we are an association of devotees, then at least we have done the right thing. We have at least endeavored to do the right thing. If something is wrong, Krishna will fix it along the way, but at least we are doing the right thing. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi.